Yes, our student teachers, as I said, we're taking about 600 students every year, but they come from hugely diverse educational backgrounds. Many, about 25% come from rural schools, which are severely, don't have the necessary infrastructure. Hugely overcrowded classrooms where things are really tough. About 50% come from standard government public schools, and about 25% come from our very affluent independent schools. Most of them are run by church organizations or NGOs and so on. And basically, they have just been students in school themselves. They come to us for a period of 4 years, and in 4 years, they've got to learn enough to be able to teach in whatever context they find a job. And so they come from very diverse backgrounds. They go into very diverse backgrounds. And it's a huge challenge, is how do you prepare a program that's not just a sausage factory, but that really does transformative work, but that works with this kind of diversity, the different dispositions, the different educational histories that our students come from. That's our challenge. I was part of a research project several years ago that looked at teacher education curriculum in different institutions across South Africa. And I noticed that hugely different conceptions of teaching. So some institutions regard teaching as an individual pursuit. And it's, you're going to take this individual journey, you're going to find the kind of teacher that you want to be. Teaching is inherently unpredictable, so you just learn to manage in the context, and you figure out what you love, you figure out what works for you, and anyway, every context is unique. So that kind of teacher preparation starts, one particular institution who adopts this kind of model. On day one, they require their student teachers to write out their philosophy of teaching on day one. And then they hold them to that philosophy over the 4 years and see how those students' practices in the classroom align with their conceptions of teaching. Okay? Other programs are very designed, are specifically designed for a particular kind of context. So that this is the idea that teaching urban children is a completely different practice to teaching in rural schools. And so their curriculum is designed either for, to prepare students for rural schools or to prepare students for urban schools and so on. We don't do that. We've got this idea that teaching is a social practice. And by that, it's a patterned form of activity with its own logics, its principles, but it's enacted by teachers who are vastly different, who have different dispositions, who have different educational backgrounds, but they're working towards the same purpose and enacting that purpose in ways that are contextually possible and contextually appropriate. Well, we would hope. So it's the difference between kind of a very individualized pathway and one where one does have somebody who's making the rules of the game explicit, who's opening up the practice. And the problem here is that students have been in schools for 12, 13, 14, 15 years, and they've been watching teachers teach. And whatever they've been seeing has become naturalized. And so we've got to work with students who have very, very different visions of what it means to teach. Some of them have excellent teachers who make it look so easy. Others have simply, the teacher walks in, open the textbook, do whatever, and while they sit at the desk, So we've got very, very different visions. If they are only going into the classroom and seeing what they've already seen for 12 years, they're not going to, we're closing down possibilities for changing practice. So one of the research papers that I did many years ago, we actually analyzed students' conceptions of teaching when they came in, right in the first week. And what we found very, very strongly there was what things are visible and what things are harder to see. And what was incredibly visible to the students who came into our program were the classroom management routines and the pastoral care that the teachers provide. And, the idea of, you say to them at the beginning of the year, how many of you already know how to teach? They all just put up their hand. They said that we know how to teach. We just need to learn how to control the learners. And we need the certificate. That's why we're here. And if they go, so what is harder to see for them is how teachers work with knowledge, how they manage ideas in the classroom. Giving information is easy, but working with knowledge is a little bit, is not the same as just giving information, organizing learning pathways with that through the management of knowledge. So I love this quote. It's not about teacher education. I love this. To romanticize the world is to make us aware of the mystery, the magic, the mystery, and the wonder of the world. It is to educate the senses, to see the ordinary as extraordinary, the familiar as strange, the mundane as sacred, and the finite as infinite. Marvelous. And this whole idea of them seeing teaching with new eyes. They are so familiar with the classroom space, but they're not familiar with teaching practices. And they've got to be able to see what they think is ordinary as extraordinary, to something that they think is so familiar, to see it as strange. If we don't do that, we are simply going to reproduce prevalent practices despite how effective they are. And that's the big challenge. So I'm quoting from Knowledge Building. In addition to being cultivated through an apprenticeship, a new gaze can be trained through conceptual means. And that's what we've tried to work with, this idea of training a new gaze on teaching through conceptual means to make the familiar strange.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nekuku Matala. Okay. I'm 22 years old. I just completed my undergrad last year in 2023. Yay, I'm a graduate. And basically a bit of background about me. I grew up in Alberton. It's a small little town, like 45 minutes to an hour away from here. I went to a suburban public school for both primary and secondary school. And there were a lot of teaching practices that I observed there that at the time didn't seem like significant to me, but now looking back at my apprenticeship of observation, I can see like, okay, this was effective, this was not effective in this certain way and that other certain way. I chose teaching because I lived with my aunt in the first few years of my life, and I used to always observe my aunt. She was a teacher, so I used to sit with her as she's preparing for lessons. I used to give her some ideas here and there, help her with recording, and just sit with her at times in the classroom, and I would see the kids' faces and how they looked like when she explained something that they understood, and I would just see the spark in their eyes, and I knew from that moment like that's what I wanted to do. So that's how I came to Wits and started my BA degree.
Good afternoon all. My name is Noneba. Do you all want to say it? There's a lot of have been struggling with my name. So my name means with mercy. I'm Noneba. I'm from the south of Johannesburg, also in a small town called Zagania Park, where nobody really knows where it is. I'm 20 years old. I am currently a third-year student. I'll be doing my third year at Wits University. Before Wits University, I was in a typical public school in the south. My experience was that when a teacher would come in the class, she'd give you a textbook and open page 150 and keep quiet, right? Do the activity. So that was it was a norm. It was a thing. You do it on your own, and the only way we were assessed was through the activities. Did you manage to answer it correctly? That's how we were assessed. And other than that, she would just put emphasis on what she thought would be in the exams, right? So the reason why I became a teacher is that growing up, obviously you go to primary school, you get exposed to teachers, primary school teachers are the best. So you think, okay, teaching, great stuff, I'm going to do that. But in high school, that changed. I got exposed to different subjects, business studies, economics. I'm like, yes, I want to be that girl. But then because the school was one way, teachers were not really, they wouldn't come and stand, the teacher on the table, So one time I was given an opportunity by my teacher to explain a certain economics concept to my classmates. And when they understood everything because of me, and they would direct the questions to me and not my teacher, it was at that moment that I realized that actually from a younger age this was a calling for me, and throughout my matric year I helped my classmates to understand the concepts. So that is the reason why I became a teacher. I became a teacher because I want to make a difference in lives as much as I did with my classmates. Thank you.
So what we're wanting to do is to capture the assumptions that students come in with, so that later on they can see how their gaze on teaching has changed. So this is one of the tasks that we give our students when they arrive in the school in February into their teacher education program. Before they've had a single lecture, a single tutorial, we ask them to watch a lesson. They've been watching lessons for 12 years. They know this. And it's from a particular point in space. So, they come with a particular gaze. And it's really, this activity about watching it in week 1 is enacting the gaze that they have at that point. We then have several months of intense input, coursework, activities, tutorial activities, analysis assignments. They go and spend some time, they do my big course, Teacher Choices in Action. If those of you who know about that one. Then they go into school-based learning for 2 or 3 weeks. They try out a lesson, they come back, and what we asked them to do at that point was to watch the same lesson that they watched in their first week. And their final assignment, their exam equivalent, is what did I notice now that I didn't notice back then? How am I seeing teaching differently? So I'm just going to play 2 minutes of the lesson that we asked them to watch. And this is used with permission from Reading to Learn South Africa.
Tell me what a peer is. A peer, what's a peer? What do you understand about the word peer? Yep.
A peer is someone in your age.
Oh, is she correct?
Yes.
Then let's give her a round of applause. Yes. Good. It's someone at your age. Do we all have peers?
Yes.
Oh, right. Then what do you understand by the word peer pressure? Yeah, boy?
I think peer pressure means when your peers tell you to do something that you know is wrong.
Oh, excellent. Let's give him a round of applause. Yes. Yes, when the people of your age are forcing you, they are pressurizing you, they want you to do something wrong, then that is called a peer pressure. Sometimes peer pressure is not always wrong. Sometimes it's right. If they say, let's go and study, let's go and play soccer, is that good or bad? Good. But if someone says, oh, let's go and steal, is it a good peer pressure? No. Yes, so sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. But today, then have you ever been in that situation where your peers force you to do something wrong?
My friend asked me to go and steal my mother's money.
Your mother's money? Did you do it?
No.
Oh, you were a good girl. Follow me as I read. Peer pressure, the effects of peer pressure. Your peers are people of your own age. Peer pressure takes place when people your own age force you or influence you to behave in a certain way. There is a word that follows that tells us there are 2 words that explains us. What do they do? Yebo, Ndlovu?
Force or influence.
Yes, force or influence. Can you underline that word? Very good, girl. The second one?
You need to feel accepted.
Good. Third one?
You need to be part of your audience group.
You need to be part. And lastly?
You need to fit in.
You need to fit in. Right. So what are we talking about here, boys and girls? What is this sentence talking about in the first part, yes? Peer pressure.
Okay, so that just gives you a little bit of a taste of the lesson. I'm going to ask Noneba to come and talk about what she wrote.
Okay, so during my first year, the first week of becoming a teacher, we were asked to observe the same lesson the teachers saw now and write a report on it. So one of the key things that I noticed about the lesson is that I'm including things like the teacher is introducing the concept to the learners, and then I'm also including how the learners are responding to the teacher. So when I looked back at this again, I realized that I was in the beginning ignoring the teacher and making it seem as though the lesson was just going on a flow all on its own with nothing else. And then secondly, I began to include things like learners had to do personal opinions and the teachers explaining the concept. So in doing so, I actually realized that I was actually discussing what is happening, what is the teacher doing, what are the learners doing, back and forth like that. So I realized that in doing so, I was just merely giving a description of the lesson and what we all simply just saw. And the last thing that I noted out was that I included how she was introducing new words and ensuring that learners understand. So throughout my first observation, I did not give thorough reasons to the teacher's actions, right? Instead, when I did give the reasons, they were just simple reasons like she was just creating understanding and she was doing actions just so that the learners could understand what she was teaching.
To show us where the teacher was passive?
Oh, it's in the first one. The teacher is the first two of them. So, the topic is introduced by asking learners what they understand about it, the learners define and whatnot, and then after the learners' opinions, the teacher explains peer pressure. So basically, my whole observation of the lesson was a much more fragmented lesson, and it was just based on my apprenticeship of observation because I had to do this observation in the first week of the course, becoming a teacher. So the second one, I remember I did this almost at the very end of the module, becoming a teacher, and I had to now look back. I had to go back to my laptop and search for that assignment again and look at the video again. I didn't understand why, but I was like, okay, I'll just do it, right? But then when I really looked at it from a different perspective, I had seen that I had grown from what I was in the beginning to now. So in contrast to the first point, on the first part, I had included how the teacher is being ignored, right? But on the second side, I realized that, right here, I realized that I am now including both the teacher and the learner in the lesson, right? So this is how, this is seen through how I include that the teacher asks learners what they understand, and then providing answers to her without her help. And I also include how her action has encouraged learners to think about the term. So in doing so, I was connecting both of them, and I was not ignoring one side. Secondly, I began to shift from being pragmatic to a more technical perspective, right? So this is seen through how I start to use technical concepts that I gained from the module becoming a teacher. I start by noticing how the teacher uses semantic weights in her lesson to strengthen the semantic gravity of the lesson by connecting the learners with their personal experiences. And I continue to do that by including how she's also transferring the knowledge, the personal experience on the topic, which also resulted in the learners being promoted in cumulative learning. Lastly, in contrast to the first one, so the first one, I did not really explain the reasons behind her actions. But in this one, I'm able to explain that she does this so that she promotes the learning of writing, she does this and that so that some skills are promoted in the lesson. So this whole lesson and having to compare the two made me realize that in the first week of becoming a teacher, I was merely using my apprenticeship of observation and I was just describing the lesson. But in the second one, I used more technical concepts because I gained them through becoming a teacher. And I had realized that I am now thinking beyond what I saw the first time, and I had actually realized that I gained a new gaze to the lesson.
You wanted to tell us about how that helped you when you went into school?
So I went to teaching practices last year because during my first year we had to do teacher choices and actions. So this has helped me a lot in my teaching practicals because it has helped me understand that when I structure lessons and begin them from a concept, I have to unpack it all to the learner's personal experiences and then repack it again to create new understanding. Also, I also understood that when I start a lesson by asking learners what they know about it and their personal experience, I also have to ensure that in doing that, I do not focus more on their personal experiences, but ensure that at the end of the lesson, they have acquired new knowledge. Thank you.
So how did we get, what did we do? What's the black box that shifted her from a very fragmented, simple, descriptive lesson observation report to one that was connected, sophisticated, nuanced, and very connected? I mean, for a first-year student to write something like that, I think, yeah, it's quite amazing. Anyway, so it's this first-year course. I mean, it is the glue that starts to bring together insights from educational studies, what they're learning about psychology in education, sociology in education, content knowledge, subject methodologies, but really deepening the understanding of what a teacher does and how a teacher works with knowledge. And that's the thing, that was what was invisible to them, is the nuances of teachers managing ideas and creating processes or pathways for learning. So we give them these conceptual and analytical tools. So, learning through experience and learning through formal instruction, and how that opens or closes to a certain, different ways of understanding. Just in terms of the LCT that we bring into the course, epistemological constellations, we introduce them to semantic gravity, semantic density. We show them, for example, that their understanding of being a teacher is one that has been created, through their experiential learning. And now we are doing that more formal instruction. We're strengthening the semantic density. We're weakening the semantic gravity, and so on. So, we're taking through a very much a meta process of the learning during the course. We use semantic profiles to guide their design, their thinking of how they're sequencing their lesson steps into a learning process. We give them the language of teacher, knowledge, PCK, the kind of pedagogical reasoning, the kind of bringing together all the different logics from context, from inclusive education, from these subjects, and so on, and how that works together. So in other words, it's kind of a roadmap for their learning for the next 4 years. And what we do is all the time, every week in tutorials, we are giving them analysis task. Let's analyze this reading, let's analyze this textbook, let's analyze this assessment task, let's analyze this lesson. So the logics of one way, if you decided to start over there with your lesson, then what? Where would you go and why? Then what would you do if you started here? What path, where would you go and why? So those are some of the conceptual tools that we think helped to shift the gaze from what they came in with to a more specialized gaze at the end. I'm going to pass on to Priya now.
Thank you, Lee. Good afternoon, researchers. I teach on the 4th year of the Being a Teacher course. I'm a lecturer on that course. Really, what we do on this course is an extension from the 1st year. So we provide a roadmap for students till they get to their 4th year. And this is an NQF 8 course, which is really a research-led course, where we really want our students to think very critically and deeply about their practice. So reasoning and critical thinking is promoted in this course, but we really want students to understand what it means to be a teacher in this current context, but more importantly, how can they use their own teaching to do research. So much of our work is really putting together the pieces, the puzzles that students have learned from first year, second year, third year, and when they get to fourth year, it's that looking back on what they learned and how does that actually help them in their teaching, in their practice, and to rethink, to unlearn, and to undo some cognitive damage that happened along the way in their teaching. So some of the tools, the conceptual tools that we use in the fourth year to really ask our learners to think about their teaching, to be very contextually and culturally responsive to their teaching, draws very largely from specialization, the specialization claim, where we look at epistemic relation, social relation, and we ask our students to use some of their own work, like their reflections, the syllabus that we give to them, to analyze, to actually look at what knowledge is being worthwhile in that specific research or guide. And it really is to give them deep analytical lenses into their practice and question what it means to be a teacher in the school, what it means to look back and say, well, I've really come a long way, we can change our practice, we can rethink, unlearn, and move forward. So along the way, there were various analytical concepts that we introduced our students to. But the big idea in the fourth year course is for our students to really be confident and to think very deeply, very critically of how they can understand what they learn, how they can transfer that information of what they learn, and to be the best teachers possible. What we really ask of our fourth years is to question their own practice, to find solutions to their own difficulties and understanding in their practices. And really it's very interactive, it's very engaging. So there's specific concepts like when they use a specialization plane that we provide to them, they come up with, and it's really fascinating to see how they can understand their own practices, question their own practices, and create new models for their own practice at a fourth year level. So the being a teacher is really driving metacognition. We want our students to be researchers in their own practice. We want them to think beyond just the classroom. What does this mean for when I go out? How can I contribute? It's much deeper than just the classroom itself. And some of the guides, some of the assessment tasks, so these are formative assessments that we give to our learners, to really ask them to think of how assessment pedagogy and teaching and learning are interrelated and how they can make a change, is looking at their reflection. So what we really did is we asked of our fourth year students, this was one of their major assignments that we had given them, is to take their reflection from first year, second year, third year, any piece of their reflection, and analyze their reflection using the specialization plane. So they had to use a specialization plane that they used previously and not at their fourth year, because at the fourth year they had their conceptual understanding of the specialization plane and what it means and how they're going to use it. They had to plot the pathways on the specialization plane. They had to discuss its patterns. And really, at the end, it was a critical analysis of how they can make their reflection much better. So that is one way in which we ask students to reflect on their own practice and think critically and deeply about their own practice.
Just said, yeah, it was before they did their final practice.
Yes, it was before they did their final teaching practice. Right, and then the specialization plane which we had given to our students to allow them to plot on looked something like this. Students really enjoyed using it. It went from specific concepts and protocols to general knowledge, to discernment and perspectives not offered. So they were given this plane, they had to plot on this plane, and at the end, they, Senagugu will take you through some of the transformation that happened in terms of her learning and her reasoning using the specialization thing.
In 2022, I attended my teaching experience practicals, and I was writing reflections based on that, and believe it or not, this is one of the best. My reflection, first thing you noticed about this reflection was the fact that it is not shifting through the various codes. It is mainly in the relativist code, and I didn't really shift through the many codes. My analysis was just simply like, for example, my first sentence, today the lesson was a life skills lesson on plant and the process of planting a plant. Like, there was nothing in depth. I didn't really reflect much on the entire process as a whole. Another thing I realized about this is that I did not use much knowledge. As much as I threw in a bit of theory here, like in sentence 4, it says, the lesson had pedagogical making on a basal scale, as these concepts were taught through over a week, but it was not, there was no reasoning behind it. I did not use my specialization gaze as an educator to explain why. I did not use much other theories and concepts that I learned throughout my BA degree to explain the reasons for the actions that I actually took. Another thing I noticed is that I did not go into the NOAA code at all, and I also noticed that I determined the success of this lesson that I taught through the fact that the students responded well to this engaging lesson, to the participation of the lesson. And I also determined the success of the lesson was the fact that the learners enjoyed the lesson. I didn't really determine the success of the lesson through the fact that this lesson was quality, that they actually learned something. I determined the success of the lesson through the fact that they participated well and they enjoyed. This is before I learned about the specialization plane, the codes, shifting the code, the various specialization codes. So this is before. It helped me reflect. Through doing this assignment, I noticed all the problems that I made, and it kind of helped me to reflect better. I wrote another piece about it in the next slide. In the next slide, this was part of the...
sorry, hang on. It's just, so this was how I can make a reflection. This is Teresa.
Yes, ma'am. I wrote an assignment about that previous reflection of mine. This is from my essay in which I stipulated how I could make my reflection a bit better. For example, I mentioned not staying in one code and shifting through the different codes, because I did mention that my reflection was solely in the relativist code. I did not use much knowledge. I also mentioned here how I could better this my reflections going forward is I could use pedagogical content knowledge and specialized theoretic knowledge that I applied in university, which I didn't really do it in the other reflection. I didn't use much knowledge, and I realized I didn't give reasoning for the choices that I made. And also I mentioned going forward, I would use personal experience and conceptual knowledge to reflect on and for action. So I need to use my personal experience as well, because I didn't go into the lower code previously. I didn't use any of my personal knowledge and personal experiences. So going forward, in order for me to reflect, to improve my reflections, is I would go into the personal experience as well as the conceptual knowledge to reflect for action. And this is my fourth year reflection, a portion of my fourth year reflection, which seems a little better than the other one. It's not mainly in the relativist code. I switched from the various codes. I did go into the different codes with this reflection. I mentioned theory, but I didn't just solely mention the theory, Bruner's theory of representations. I mentioned the reason why I use Bruner's theory and how I actually use Bruner's theory to improve the lesson and to improve the comprehension of the learners. I also determined the success of my lesson based on the actual quality of the lesson and not solely the learner's participation. It wasn't solely based on whether the learners were participating, whether the learners were just interacting, but it was based on the quality of the lesson and why I feel that the lesson was successful, that they demonstrated comprehension throughout they demonstrated comprehension of the concept through the evaluation activity. I did also go into the lower code as well, because I mentioned here in my full sentence that I believe that this lesson would not go well as the learners were restless. However, we dived into the lesson in a manner that we all enjoyed, and I was able to bring high energy to lessons. So I did bring my personal perspective and combine it with knowledge, Vygotsky's knowledge as well as students' knowledge. Thank you.
So, just in conclusion, how do we take students, many of whom have had shocking experiences of school, put them through some sort of program that 4 years later they have had some sort of disruption of that conceptions of teaching and the visions of teaching, going from and going to very, very different schooling contexts. And the pedagogy that we use quite often, and I've just given you two of the examples, of the many examples, is noticing what I didn't notice before. Having the conceptual tools to notice, the language to describe, the analytic tools to see what is going on, to analyze my own practice. So sort of capturing your own, how you're enacting a practice, getting a little bit of distance from that through conceptual means, getting that new gaze, analyzing it, enacting again, and making that kind of revision. So it's kind of, if I had to, how are we making the familiar strange? I would say it's noticing more, thinking deeper, seeing possibility, like Sinagu, seeing that she hadn't gone into the no code, and then creating conditions of possibility to teach better. That's our hope. Thank you very much.